record on this computer. Good to go.
All right, y'all.
So, yeah, do you guys? What do you want to talk about, Mitch?
Well,
Sound like you got something. High
I
out
found
the gate.
it fascinating. So the other weekend, I was talking with some people that were really, really set on the Bible and the idea that there's like original sin, and we need to be as much like Jesus as possible. Yet it's not ever possible to actually be perfect, because Jesus was perfect, and as humans we can only be so good, but we can never be perfect. And it's been a while since I was raised in the Christian church as Lutheran, which I would consider fairly watered down Christianity. I was left with a ton of questions, not many answers, and so I went on my own journey to find the truth. And so I studied like Zen Buddhism. I read a ton of Alan Watts books. I looked into Native American stuff. I mean, I went to Peru, I went in the jungle, drank all that stuff, and like tried to find the truth. And I still didn't necessarily find anything through that. But there's a few things though. And I think the overarching thing is that the understanding of God, which we have another podcast on, so we don't necessarily have to get into that, but the understanding of God is so much more than just some being who's like a man in the clouds sitting there judging us, or something outside of ourselves. And this idea that Jesus is somehow, because he like died on a cross, that gets us some sort of pass for like living kind of like a screwed up life. I just see it as a lot of abdicating responsibility, and I see that the message gets twisted a lot. Yet I also heard a lot of what these people were saying, where it's very close to what we talk about in Self-Perfected, yet there's some key distinctions in the vocabulary that is missing. And so I thought, wow, this is such a loaded topic. And I know even if right now people, our listeners, aren't involved in church or consider themselves into religion or spirituality or whatever, we're all raised with some understanding of God, whether our parents taught us something and we accepted it, or we rejected it and went the opposite way. That stuff, like a core pillar of self-perfection, is to look at our past, because that idea of God, what it is or isn't, or even if it's real, we're walking around with that in our mind at an unconscious, subconscious level, and it plays out everywhere in the world, especially with looking to the government or looking to some people that you perceive as more godly than you or better than you. And I'd see it as just one giant trap that keeps people really stuck. And so I thought that would be a cool topic of conversation for us to have, because I know we've all been through this and investigated this at length, and in turn we've come to some pretty solid conclusions. And then it becomes like a jumping off point by which how we can actually live and affect real change in the world. Like if Jesus were here, or if God were incarnated on earth, like how would they actually live in 2020 and beyond? So that's the jumping off point that I suggest.
That's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Topic. Yeah. I like this topic a lot, because I grew up kind of like you're saying, grew up going to church, except for me, it wasn't really like a watered down thing. And we talked about this on the previous like God podcast, but for me, it was really serious. I grew up kind of going, being told often that I would make a good pastor, and pretty much at a very young age, thinking that was probably what I was going to do with my life, is just grow up and be some kind of pastor or something like that. And it was interesting because I went to church often, multiple times a week. My mom would, take us to church, and then we'd go to like some Bible study or something like that. The interesting thing about that as well is that we went to multiple churches. So it wasn't just, we only had this one experience. We had experiences of all different kinds of churches, non-denominational, Baptist, like the real Southern Black Baptist, all different spectrums, Catholic, Lutheran, everything, right? All within Christianity, of course. But we went through all these churches, and my experience was really just like learning the Bible stories really well, and then also being able to explain them to people as a child, as clearly as I could as a child, but it impressed people the way that I could explain things, probably because, already a little intelligent. And with that, my understanding of how I lived my life throughout my younger years, through middle school and all that, was very much in line with how I understood what I was being told by like youth pastors and things like that, other people in the church community. And it was very much like that was my entire life. Everything was based off of that information, right? And then as I got older, I told you guys a little bit about my experience where, I'd read, I just basically had a moment where I was like, oh, none of this stuff is real. Like, it's not what I think it is. And that kind of spiraled me into like a depression. And then I started just kind of living for my self-interest, just doing whatever the hell I wanted. Because like I had lived by these rules this whole time. And none of that is real. And I didn't want to be doing that anyway. And so now I get to do whatever I want, right? And it wasn't until I got TechnoTutor where now I can look back on those things that I had learned and I see, oh, there's actually a lot of good stuff in there, but the way that I was taught, it was corrupted. It was like, those files are corrupted. And so like the people have their own interpretations of things that are not correct, but that somehow gets spread into the wide mainstream and then like gets taught to a child and not explained properly. And so there were a lot of things that weren't fully explained as a kid that I just kind of accepted and was like, oh, well, this is, part of this teaching or whatever. And because this person of authority is saying it, let me just accept that as well and add that to my understanding of all these things. And I think that's what happens with most people. Most people who are religious or who have gone through the religious system in some way or other, they're getting that like corrupted information, and they're not able to really understand it themselves or break it down themselves or see clearly for themselves, like this makes sense, that doesn't make sense, and even like, there's that principle, investigate all things and keep what is good, keep what is best, right? Well, if you look at the Bible or any other religious text, but I'm comfortable with like what I know from the Bible, so we'll go with that. If you look at that, it's a book that was made of letters, a collection of letters from different authors, of different times and everything, all put together by a group of people who saw value in, hey, we can use this for either control or whatever, right? And they had an agenda by putting all that stuff together in the way that they did. There were things that they left out, there were things that they added in, whatever. But if you look at it from the principle of investigate all things and keep what is best, it's almost as if you have to do that with that text. Like, okay, if you're actually living this, if you actually understand what's within this text, then you have to do that with this text. And clearly, people are discarding things because if you read through it, there's shit in there that you're like, what? People did this? Like, it would never be acceptable today, right? And so we're discarding things already, but yet somehow people cannot make the distinction for themselves, because they don't have that processing ability. They're not seeing clearly. They're not understanding everything completely, where they cannot go, oh, well, this is clearly not best, because they have already accepted, like, no, God said this, and so I must also include this or whatever, right? But this is a topic that I really enjoy. So I'm really excited to get into it. That's not it yet. I haven't even gotten into it yet. I'm excited for, really breaking all that stuff down. But yeah.
Preach. I could so see you being a pastor, Drake.
It's my final opportunity. I get to do it now. Yes.
Live streaming with Drake. Church with Drake Wednesday nights.
I definitely want to do that. It's coming. It's
Mhm.
coming.
Well, isn't that what you doing on the self-perfected hangouts?
Basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I look back at when I was a kid and seeing like youth groups in church. And at the end of the day, the main thing that I got from it was just a group of friends. And like that was pretty much the best they could do to really get through to me as a teenager who's kind of angsty, didn't want anything to do with, whatever. I was, all screwed up in that way. But it's like at the end of the day, the thing that we ended up doing that I found kept bringing me back was like had fun with the people and we like go out and do things together.
Yeah.
And I didn't get any sense of, oh, I should actually take on certain characteristics or virtues and live my life in a different way. It was like, oh, okay, I'll go to church, hang out with these people, get some food, read something in the Bible, be bored
We'll
to
say
death.
all the same stuff in the Bible, but that's just like that part. We have to do that part.
Yeah. And then it was like, then I would go home and be spiteful toward my parents. And like, it wouldn't even register. Like I was so unconscious. And
It's
this
just
is
like going to school and you go in
Yeah.
and learning algebra class, you repeat it and everything, you go home and you don't even apply it ever.
Exactly. And it's like, Jesus said, treat your neighbor as you want to be treated. And I'm like, it just didn't even click. And so that's why I've loved so much, especially recently, learning about Destiny, using TechnoTutor, those two things specifically of like, this is what it actually means to investigate and take on this process of understanding something that's so much greater than yourself. And by self, I just mean like your ego and what your mind says. And then to actually realize like what an opportunity it is to be alive as a human, as a being here in the physical, and what we can actually do, because the current situation on Earth is basically hell on earth for the vast majority of people, pretty much for everybody. So yeah.
I want to add this point. Like, look at the difference between the approach used in church and teaching the Bible and things like that, versus if you really go into Destiny, you start looking into all of that stuff. The difference is with Destiny, the way it's presented is giving you context to help you understand things so that you can apply things differently in your life, so that you can live that principle of doing what's best for others. Like in the Bible, not in the Bible, but when you go to church, because I've been to like, I kind of had a similar experience. Was it you, Drake, that said you went to all these different churches? Yeah, you were the one saying that, right? I had a very similar-ish experience where we went to like Lutheran churches, we went to Catholic. My grandparents are Methodist, my other grandparents were Baptist. Like, I went to like charismatic churches with my mom, like all kinds of the whole gamut, right? And really fundamentally, it was all the same. It was all really fundamentally just what you were saying, Mitch, which is like, you're just there to like go and be there and be with people. And it's kind of like, we were joking, I think on one of the last few recent podcasts, and I was like, the difference between like a white family reunion versus a black family reunion, or a barbecue or picnic or whatever it was. Yeah. It's like, which flavor do you like? You know what I mean? Do you like Catholic, where everything's real specific, like there's a systematic way of you do everything, you say this, you do that, you stand up here, you do this, and then afterwards you go and do that, versus a different approach, which might be more like free flowing or something like that, or it might be more exciting, or it might be, whatever. But fundamentally, you didn't walk away from it going, okay, so here's how I take responsibility in my life and apply myself differently. If anything, you just learn, even if there is an element of that, it's more like a take this and do this.
Yeah.
Which is not what is presented within Destiny. Within Destiny, it's more like, here's the tools of how to investigate what you're accepting and allowing within yourself. And you need to decide for yourself, is this best or not? No one can tell you. We're not going to say, here's a list of behaviors that are best and a list of behaviors that are not, because it would depend on the context. Perhaps there would be some things you could say, well, there's no context where that would be best. But even if you were told what that list is, if you just accept it as like information from someone else, it's not the same as you understanding it and living it in as your free choice to do it because you see it's not best. So the difference is, it's like going to school and memorizing everything versus actually going and being an apprentice and learning it and applying it. You know, like the guild system and being an apprentice versus what we have with school now, two totally different things. And on the one hand, one creates self-responsibility in the individual. On the other hand, you just have a system of control. And one of you guys mentioned that, you know, and it's interesting too, you know, I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but, you know, I went to a Catholic school and we had to study it and everything. And I've read a lot, you know, since then as well. But the whole idea of even Jesus and what Jesus is, no one even agrees on that. And even within people who are Christian, no one even agrees on what Jesus was, who he was, what was he really saying, what was he saying you should do or don't do, or what was he presenting. And added to that, what Drake was saying earlier, the books that are in the Bible are picked. There's not the only books. They're not the only information that was talking about Jesus. Like there's other books that are not included, like the Gospel of Thomas, for example, is not in the Bible. And people say, well, it's not authentic and all this stuff. And it's like, no, it's authentic. It's from that same era. It's just whether you agree with it or not. You know, do you like what it says? And if you look at it, it gives more context to the whole picture. And so, I mean, how is it any different than what we're seeing right now on social media, where it's like a story comes up here that favors the side who controls the platform, and they're like, yeah, let's let that go. But if something comes up that they don't like, they immediately are saying it's not true, it's false, it's wrong. There's something they don't, you know, they give some justification for why they're not allowing it to be shared.
Right.
You know, it's so you see how information can be controlled today. I would think it's easier to control it back then, because who actually had access and time to copy down a manuscript? So there'd be like one in the church for like the whole village or the whole city or province or whatever. You know what I mean? There'd be one copy of it, and only one person or a set of people could even read it.
Yeah.
You know, so it'd be so much easier to control what information. It's not like everybody had books on their shelf or the internet.
I mean, that's the whole thing with Lutheranism, right? Is that it was going from Latin, church being in Latin, to vernacular, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And before that, you didn't even have like the Gutenberg press. So it's like you had, in order to even have it transcribed, like you're saying, you had to be wealthy. You had to have a scribe, you know?
I'm going to look up while you guys are talking, how many books are not in the Bible? How many books
So
rejected from
All
canon?
of the other ones.
Yeah, I think it was the Council of Trent where they decided which ones make the cut. I may not be correct on that. I'm sure you'll find it, Cameron. But I had heard the argument from some people who are also very hardcore religious, that they were trying to give the argument that, like, because God is so powerful and wise, that only the books that made the cut, so to speak, that made it in the Bible, like God was watching over it to make sure that it's still like this living word. And then that leads into this, where then people say, well, the Bible is like a living book. It's like these living words, and you can open a random page and it'll speak to you and all this stuff, right? I'm like,
But
what, Drake?
they don't even know what does that mean, living word? Like, do they know what that means?
I don't think so. I think it's kind of a word that got thrown around for them. And the take I've heard on it is, oh, it's a book that was not only pertinent to the time back 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, but it also is alive today and it applies to our world, which kind of works with
I
most
like
books.
I like just going to phrases in the Bible that are relevant to whatever conversation that I'm having with someone. When I find out they're
Mhm.
religious, I like going to phrases that are relevant to whatever conversation we're having and just breaking it down for them and watching their faces, because people always just accept, like they've heard it 100 times, 1,000 times, whatever it is, right? And they've just accepted it like, yep. But they do no contemplating into or considering what it actually means. And so when you break it down for them, or when you just start like just dissecting it piece by piece, then they start to go, oh, what, that makes so much sense. Why haven't I understood that ever? And it's like, there's the whole thing is like that. The whole thing is like that. And you've just kind of accepted this surface level. And then you think that it's it's like when you go to see a movie and, there's like this deep meaning behind the movie or whatever, right? And you go with your friend and your friend's like, I really enjoyed the movie. And they think just because they enjoyed it that they got it, right? But you see within it like, oh, but do you see how that like relates to this and the metaphors that they were throwing in, and how like if you watch something as simple as like a Quentin Tarantino movie, they're like almost all the scenes are throwbacks to other movies. But if you're not a movie buff, it's an enjoyable movie. You can still enjoy it, But if you're a movie buff, you can look at the scenes and go, wow, he pulled that from, the 70s of that classic and all this. Yes. And you can see all of that progress in front of you. But
the Bible is like a self-referential document that references other parts of itself, which are like historically significant to people who would have lived in the time and then would have had their history and everything. And it's like, how much of it is relevant to today? And honestly, like what's something, because earlier you mentioned there's cool points in the Bible. Like what would be an example of that?
Well, I think investigate all things and keep what is best. That's a.
But how is that not just common sense?
That is common sense. But
so why do you need a Bible to know that? So it's like, think about this. Like you have, this might sound really weird. Let's say you have a porn video. Okay. And in the porn video, the couple is married. And you're like, no, everybody should watch this porn video because it's showing the value of being in a committed relationship. And you're like, yeah, okay, that's true. That's in there. But there's a lot of other stuff contextually that you probably don't want to expose children to or program people with or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's a thing in there that's cool, but that's like justifying everything else, because then the question becomes, so why hasn't the Bible then been over time just the common sense parts and everything else is rejected? Like, why is it relevant for us to go through a list of the genealogy of all the people up to David and stuff like that? Like, why is there a whole book of the Bible where it's like that? And the scholars can explain all the significance and everything. How does that apply to our life today in any way whatsoever? And so why is that a part of this book? Because you don't get to the part about investigate all things and keep what's best until you get through all that. So if you were reading it like a book, it wouldn't really make any sense. You know what I mean? And these books in the Bible are like hundreds of years apart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In terms of like when they were written and so forth.
Yeah. I think to be more clear about when I say like there's cool parts in the Bible, I see it as it's something that everyone's already accepted. It's just like, it's a story that everyone's already accepted. Okay, I'm gonna suss out what's best from it and highlight that, because I know that it's already within you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like you already have this context. Okay, well, I'm gonna play off of that.
But how many people actually have the context?
Not
how many people actually have read it, and how many people even know investigate all things to keep what's best is in the Bible?
Oh, not many.
You know what I mean? Like the actual good stuff, like, and then even the stuff that is cool, like for example, love your neighbor as yourself. You accept that because Jesus said it, but he also said turn the other cheek, right? Apparently.
Yeah.
Should you do that? Is that loving your neighbor as yourself? Like,
no.
Yeah, not necessarily.
How many people are willing to do the sacrifice that Jesus did?
Yeah.
And so what parts of it should you keep and what parts should you not keep? You still have to use discernment. And so what I see is it all comes down to your starting point. And if your starting point is, hey, I really just want to read the Bible to get like the best parts about it, it's like, well, then just go to the Destiny Principles and read those, because that's what that is. All the good parts of it are going to be there. And you can, let Asif. You know what I mean? Like, I know there's going to be people who are going to be like, oh, but there's truth in the Bible and all this stuff. Okay, fine. You can do that. That's not a problem. Right. But when you're making it like this book is special, that's the issue. Do you see what I mean? Hey, Asif, let's fill Asif in because he came in. We are talking about the Bible now that you're here, we could talk about the Quran, right? Because you have experience, you know, from a
Not
Muslim
really,
family
no.
and all that. Culturally, I guess, right? I mean, none of how many people who are Christian actually have read the Bible, anyways?
Yeah.
But we're just talking about. I guess you could just extend it to the religious text, generally speaking, but how people they kind of just follow the information in it without really understanding it, and then none of it is actually applied to change yourself or to make the world best for all or any of that. So we're kind of looking at what are the cool elements and so forth. That's what we were just talking about.
And how it's used as justification. How it's like, well, Jesus was just so perfect that I could never be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. Yeah.
But somehow Jesus, it's like I'm saved because Jesus died on a cross. So like I get eternal afterlife or something. But but like I can't be like Jesus. I can try to be like Jesus, but I definitely can't be like Jesus.
Even though Jesus said I can be like him and even better, I'm just gonna like forget about that part because that would require me to take responsibility.
That's what I mean. That's why I'm saying it's all about the starting point of the person.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to bash the Bible or bash Christianity
Like
or
it
bash
in
anything.
itself is not bad.
No, I mean, because in itself you can't even define it.
Exactly.
You can't, because what's the one version of Christianity? There's got to be 100 or more different versions.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Actually,
so
you know what? I was listening to some of on your YouTube channel. You have some your old Facebook lives that you posted to YouTube.
yeah,
And one thing that I extracted from it recently is like at the end of the day, you can interpret the Bible, the Quran, whatever, multiple different ways. That's why you have so many different denominations, right? So the logical conclusion, I remember when I first heard that, a year or two ago, listening to that same video, I was like, oh shit, then what the hell do you do, right? But the whole point is, okay, if I interpret it this way, it involves me like thinking I'm superior to other people and like not actually doing stuff. Like you just look at the outcomes of it versus if you interpret it this way, it just makes way more sense about why that would actually create a better world. So that's why you should interpret it in the quote unquote the best way.
yeah. But where's the point in the Bible where it talks about creating a better world? Is that even a part? And I'm not saying that it's not there, but that's not, name one religion that's the actual point of it. For example, Drake earlier brought up the whole thing with Lutheranism and how it was the split in the church. Part of it what had to do with them wanting to put the Bible in German so that people could read the Bible. They didn't have to know Latin and so forth. But another part of it had to do with this dispute between whether, it was your faith in Christianity and Jesus plus what you do in terms of like they call your works, or whether it was just your faith alone that would save you, And it's like, what's the starting point of that whole discussion?
Okay.
Yeah, it's like save me from my darkest fears.
Right. And the works, it's not even about, okay, because the consequence of doing good works is that you create a world that's best for all. It's more like, because then you prove somehow that you're worth saving.
Yeah.
It's not about the actual what you're doing here in this world. It's always about something else. So the starting point of that discussion, of anyone even thinking about that discussion, is not to change this world. It's not to make this world the best it could possibly be. And then it always will come back to that point where the person, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this when you talk to people, where it's like, well, I mean, human nature and you can't change the world. I mean, you do what you can, you gotta be a good person. But I mean, it's like, no one's even really interested in that. And yet somehow they can figure out this very detailed, specific way of how to be saved in the afterlife, but they can't figure out how to just do things in a context of a reality you actually have an opportunity to understand and test and see what the result is and so forth. So you're like testing out things that you don't even know what the consequences, you can't even see it or even attempt to comprehend it. And then then you have the people who it comes down to, it's my personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And it's like, what do you mean by a personal relationship? It's like they say like it is the whatever in the room with us right now. You know what I mean? Like, is the whatever that's bothering the is it in the room with us right now?
Yeah.
Like, are you crazy?
Oh yeah.
It's like, is he here with you right now, sitting next to you? Is
Yeah.
Jesus in the room with you right now? And no, what does it mean? It means your relationship of you in your mind dealing with the bullshit in your life and the ups and downs and the anxieties and the fears and the challenges, and then giving up your worry about something to somebody else is going to make, as long as I've got this thing in my life, this allegiance, then they, because they're so much infinitely more powerful than me, they will make sure this works out.
You know what it's like? It's like becoming an adult in a way, but then still wanting to be a child, still wanting to have daddy take care of things, still
Yes.
believing in Santa Claus and the
Yeah.
tooth fairy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone else is going to make me safe and secure.
Yeah, you want that protection. You don't want to take the responsibility for yourself. And so it's like, no, it's okay. God's handling things. Jesus is handling things, you know.
And then it's also the self-trust point, because when people think that, like, well, who am I to just figure it out on my own? Like, of course I need God, or I need to make sure I'm like on God's team. Otherwise, like, I might be on the devil's team. And like, if I think I can just figure it out for myself, maybe that's like my sinful nature, that I
But
think a
think-
human can just figure it out. I think that's
Think
a
about it,
big
you're-
point for people.
You're the devil in you is just all the anxiety and the fear and the negativity.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't want to go with that. And so if I listen to that, I'm listening to the devil. And people then, you actually think it's a real devil, like whispering in your ear. Like, that's really what you think it is.
To you.
That's why I'm saying, when you look at the Destiny material and you go through DIP, for example, it's explaining to you the mechanics of how do your thoughts function, your feelings, like, where is it coming from? And so the very most basic, obvious thing from my perspective, that it's programs running inside of you, and the programs were put there by people in your environment that were speaking and acting and behaving, and you're just downloading all of this, and it's just getting stored on your hard drive, and then it starts acting as a program. And so your functionality as a human being, your thoughts and your feelings, all the anxieties, all these things are coming from the way you perceive things, but then also the way the world is set up. So why do we have anxiety? What's the most basic form of anxiety that anyone has?
I mean, not knowing if your needs are going to get met, like if there's going to be food or
Right.
water or something.
And so what's the most basic prayer people have?
For the poor.
Well, yes, but I mean, people always have this basic prayer of like, God, I give my life to you. I know that you will always provide for me.
Oh yeah.
That's like a real basic, fundamental sort of approach to praying. Like, whatever it is, I know God will provide. And it's like, but then when we would suggest, okay, let's actually create a real, actual physical system that can be tested, measured, and improved and so forth on the earth, that will actually provide for everybody. Because, okay, well, I'll come back to that.
Hang on.
Then
Dave,
the argument against it would be, oh, that's not possible, because we can go into all kinds of, we had a whole podcast on some of these things, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, so you literally just want it to be magical. You don't want it to be you're doing anything about it, or you have to lift a finger. And then this is where we get into all the points where it's really just being used to make excuses. Like the people, man, I just want to see, I feel like I'm pissed off. The people who believe in God the hardest are the most self-interested.
Mm.
The ones who put their faith all in God and all in Jesus and the truth and all this shit are the most self-interested people. Just go spend time with them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's about them being nice or mean or anything, but you'll see, like, they just are like everybody else, living their lives from the starting point of what's in it for them. That's so it's interesting, because the person who has the most faith in Jesus, where literally they don't have to be perfect, are the ones least deserving of being saved. And that's the reality of it. When you study the Destiny material, it's not like Christianity claiming that Jesus or some person is going to judge you if you don't follow their rules. It's pointing out the basic common sense that if you don't live your life, if you don't change every element and dimension of who you are, to always be acting in a way that's best for all by your choice in every moment, then the consequence of your choices will be not best. And therefore you don't deserve to be here in reality. Now you might say, well, that sounds like original sin. No, because you're given an opportunity to correct it. And you'll be given opportunities later. But what I'm saying is, it's like if someone came into your house and they just started shitting all over your floor, you'd be like, look, buddy, you can't come in here anymore. You got to change that. You can't do that anymore. And we would hold our politicians to this standard. We would hold the corporations, but we would not hold ourselves to this standard because, well, I don't have any control over that. But that is just laziness in terms of being willing to sit down and think it through of, okay, how does everything happen in this world? It happens. And yes, I know there are accidents. There's things that happen in nature, like a tree falls down or something like that. And I'm not talking about all of those details, right? Because that's just probably too much right now. But basic things of like, why does a company decide to produce a product? It's not just God going zip products. That's not how it works. It's people making decisions, influencing through advertising and the way the money system is all set up and everything. It's actually real physically here, right? So I see it. It's so clear to me. Yeah. The starting point of the person who is believing in all those things, and because you can push the point with them. You say, okay, so give your neighbor as you want to receive, or give to your neighbor as you would like to be given. Okay, so how do we make that happen practically? Like, well, you give. I give money to charity, and I always give a smile to people, and I get, they feel better. And
yeah, I give a lot to charity, actually.
Yeah,
thank you very
much. It's like, okay, what do those charities do with that money? Do they solve the problem?
They spread the word of God to save others.
Or they give money to these people, but it's like, yeah, show me one charity where the beneficiaries of the charity are living a life equal to the person who runs the charity. There's not one. It's all bullshit. And I mean, that's like basic kindergarten stuff. If you're starting to understand the system, you'll see what charities really are. What's the purpose of them? The whole system. It's not what you think it is, And the problem also, one of the major problems in the Bible specifically is because it's been handpicked, like what's in there and what's not. When you really start studying, for example, the New Testament, you have all this really cool stuff that Jesus said, and some of it you don't really understand what he said because it's like a translation of a translation of a translation. But then you also have, for example, this whole story with St. Paul, where St. Paul comes in there and he's like, oh, it's all about your faith in Jesus and just only believing in him and you'll be transformed and all. And it's like totally taking it out of the context of what did Jesus actually say we needed to do? And what was he actually doing and saying and everything? And no one really even knows that. And so like, I think it was Mitch, you were talking about when people talk about, well, you can't be perfect like Jesus, right? What do they even think perfect like Jesus means? Like, what is their idea of what Jesus was doing and even suggesting that you should model, even though we can't do it perfectly?
Yeah, I don't even think their thought process goes that deep. But let's say it did. It would be like, well, he would never sin. So he would like always be in a good mood. Like,
yeah, nice. What does sin mean? What does it mean to sin?
I mean, sinning technically means missing the mark. So it's like there's a bullseye, which I see as doing what's best. So like,
see, but they're not going to agree with that premise.
Yeah, they're not.
Oh yeah,
because how was Jesus perfect? By never sinning. Okay, how do we then be perfect like Jesus? We can't be perfect like him. So you do your best, but then you just have faith in him and you give yourself completely to him. Okay, so what is the things that you're doing your best at that he would be perfect at? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't sin. Okay, well, what is a sin? It's when you go against God. What does that mean? So when you don't accept God, isn't that the same thing as just putting your faith in God? Like, how did Jesus, if you are God, how is it possible for you to sin? If the basic premise of sin is rejecting God and you are God, well, that doesn't seem like you're very special that you don't sin.
Yeah.
It's like you could do whatever the fuck you want technically, because how can you reject yourself?
Right.
So it's not a realistic standard. It's not quantifiable. It's not measurable.
It's really abstract.
And then what is original sin?
It's just that no. Oh, well, because you're not God.
Hold on. What was original sin? Like Drake probably, I'm sure what was original sin?
just the fact that because Adam and Eve sinned, and you're
No, no,
from,
but what was the sin?
They didn't
Oh.
listen to what God told them to do.
Right, they rejected God.
right.
So what the fuck is sin then? Well, you didn't accept God and follow his commandments. What were his commandments? Don't eat from the tree. That's it. I mean, because read the Bible. What was his commandments? The only one I can remember is don't eat from that tree. Why? Why can't you eat from that tree? Well, it's a metaphorical tree, knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so what is good and what is evil? I didn't see it clearly defined. Well, I mean, if you're good, you follow God, and if you're evil, you reject God. Okay, but again, what is he saying you should do? What is it that you're rejecting? What is it that you're accepting? There is nothing clearly defined in there. So even if you wanted to follow the Bible according to the rules of it, and it's not like you're taking responsibility, it's not even clear what those are. Because it also said you should like cut your children's foreskins off and all this other stuff. And then later in the Bible, it says you don't have to do that, but you can. And, you know, also
And you
should,
can
like,
go commit
stone gay
genocide.
people.
Yeah, a whole
and
group
don't
of
get
people.
tattoos. If you have tattoos, you should be killed. And it's like, what? And then people are like, oh, the mark of the beast and all this. And I'm like, you're reading a text that's clearly metaphorical.
Yeah.
You're taking it literally. But then the obvious literal shit you're saying is metaphorical. And it's like, what the fuck are you actually? And the reality is, even the people who take the Bible totally seriously, like 100%, there's two people like that and they totally disagree. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can totally take it seriously and still come up with a different conclusion than somebody else, because it's like, to me, it's like collecting Pokemon cards. You could just get really obsessed with it. You know what I mean? It becomes the focal point of your life. And then yet over here, you're just like a normal person doing everything, like using money, buying shit that you like, eating food that you like, not changing anything in this world, complaining about stuff. Who actually reads the Bible and goes, okay, this is the key to making the world best? And then even if someone does, what do they do next? Well, everyone needs to just accept this.
Yeah.
There's no actual doing
Door
anything.
knocking, selling Bibles.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, like what is it? The ones that not the Mormons, it's the other ones, I think, the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's those ones. They came to our house one time and they were like telling me all about how in the Bible it doesn't use Jesus's real name or something. And that I need to buy the Bible they have because it's got Jesus's real name or something.
Oh,
I'm like, and I was like, okay,
Wow, that's a shitty sales technique.
so I started talking to him
I
about
like to
equal money system.
And
And they're basically saying like, oh, you know, you can't affect that kind of stuff. It's the same stuff we're saying right now. They had the same exact excuses, right? And the reality is they probably don't even know why they're there. They're probably there because they have this feeling of I'm fucked. Like I have no purpose. I feel like my life has no real meaning, and I'm not satisfied really in most areas of my life. But if I go and I attach myself to this, it makes me feel good. It gives me a sense of purpose. I feel like I have something to do. It's like, that's great. It's like a hobby, but it does not change it. It doesn't change anything, you know? And I mean, it's not, I don't want people to think we're just picking on Christianity. It's every religion.
yeah.
There is no religion that, and how do you know this is true? Because show me an example where it's actually doing anything other than just taking advantage of people who are low IQ, low vocabulary.
My favorite, like, you know, the whole 5 minutes to learn, lifetime to master, like things that make sense over time, was Bernard saying everything is in reverse.
Mm.
And when you start seeing it as such, things will start to make sense. And I think it was in one of his blogs. He says, you know, everyone thinks God created man, but man created God. I'm like, how so? He's like, that's why what you were saying earlier, it's like everybody has their own, like that's between me and my God, like me and God. Like everybody has their own God. That's proof that we created it up here. It's like the externalization of control. Like, okay, it's like the manifestation of not taking responsibility. So then we created this thing that takes responsibility for us that's outside of ourselves. And David,
But it doesn't actually take responsibility.
Exactly. And that's why
it just gives us the feeling that we've convinced ourselves that it's being taken care of. And it's like, it's not. You got to at some point address it.
And David Coulon Pepin, he said it so well, like a long time ago. He's like, you see how, whether it be in the spiritual world of like what happens when you die, or believing in the universe, or religious context, everybody always has all the different interpretations. For us, it's like we all have the same interpretation. It's like, yeah, just look around. What's here is what you should deal with. Like, you know what I mean? It's just so it's unified from the perspective of, yeah, because we're looking at things not just with logic, with common sense logic, we come to the same conclusions. Right?
Yeah.
And people
Sorry, go ahead, Asa.
People could argue that it's like, oh, because you're brainwashed and all that stuff. You guys are all brainwashed, thinking all the same thing. Okay.
Everybody's brainwashed.
Go back and listen to our, was it You Are Brainwashed audio? Or
something like that.
Brainwashed Lives Matter. I think it was like episode 13.
Go listen to that first. Then come back and go ahead. Like, we openly invite you to dispute everything we're saying. Just do it with us. Just do it. Like, come do it to our face. All right. I have so many, like, not so many, but many people who are lurking in the shadows, that when somebody like starts taking on, the self-perfected or whatever, like any kind of the tools, their friends will be like, oh, like, you fell into the cult, and like, what, what's going on? Like, you got to watch out for those guys and all that stuff. That Asif guy, right? And then I message him like, hey, how's it going?
Isn't it
like,
isn't it great? Isn't it great being a cult leader now?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Like now you're getting that people, and I'm like, Asif, like, I mean, I get it. Why? Because you're putting yourself out there. But if everybody took self-responsibility, there wouldn't be any cult leaders. The only reason people, you know what it is when people say stuff like that? They're just jealous because they don't want to change. So there's no way they'll ever fit into this group, but they don't have a group because nobody likes them, because they're of no value to anything or anyone in this world. So they just get jealous and they get spiteful. That's all it is. But when you come, somebody made a point earlier about, why you go to church, and it's like, it's for the community. It's for, Mitch, right? You're saying like, you just go and you're with your friends and stuff, right? And I remember I started getting into going to church when I was maybe like around middle school or high school, because it was like the youth group or whatever. And I would go, and it's like, there was girls there, you know what I mean? Like that was it. And I would just go and say what I needed to say. And usually people get mad because I would challenge them on stuff, because I like arguing about stuff or whatever. But I would go back just because there was kids there, right? And my parents would let me do that, right? But like self-perfected, that's all it really is. It's just.
Are you drinking the blood of Christ, Mitchell?
Am I drinking what?
The blood of Christ?
No, it's a tea.
Oh, okay.
It's the tea of Christ.
Wine, tea, whatever.
It's the tea of Christ. But it's like you come into the self-perfected group, and you're just hanging out. That's the whole point. That's why we call them hangouts, right? So you then there's tools and there's information, but you take that back for yourself and you apply it for yourself and you investigate and you come back to the group. And the whole point of the group is everybody is constantly moving forward. When have you ever gone to a church and every week you go back, like 10% of the people that have been there could get up in the front and do what that pastor's doing. Yeah. And then like the new people come in and everyone kind of shifts forward, and then those people can do it, and those people, and then it's like suddenly everyone can speak the same language, explain the same things, understand the same points, holding themselves accountable. And the reaction to being brainwashed and all that stuff, it's like, again, everything is brainwashing. You're a computer. You don't function if you don't have a program. So it's not stop judging being programmed and just consider what's the result of your programming.
And that's the key point that I wanted to make with, you can interpret the Bible as any way you can interpret everything, right? Even, for example, Jinn. We see a lot of people take Kim Trudeau's words and interpret them in a way that they don't have to change. That's the fundamental point of how people approach religion, any kind of religious text, any kind of motivational video or any kind of teaching. It's like, how do I just make this fit into, what I already think? And then the rest just like, I didn't hear that. And so that kind of starting point, realize that the only thing that you should ever look at is what's the outcome. If I actually apply this, what would be the outcome? And obviously the limitation of that will be your ability to read or process information effectively. It's always going to be your limitation.
Well, then to build on that, because I see sometimes people think, well, oh yeah, do what's best and like live by principles and all that. Like, yeah, it sounds kind of cool. Maybe I'll do that or whatever. Especially like the new people who come to self-perfected, like, yeah, this seems kind of cool, kind of like unique, right?
Yeah.
But to really dive into what does it mean to take full responsibility in your life and actually live as we interpret Jesus did, and like give as you want to receive and create and change the system. I mean, what that really entails means you have to get really effective, and you have to become persuasive and influential, and you have to be part of a cool network, and you have to be able to bounce ideas back and forth and grow and evolve. And then that means you make a lot of money. And that means you understand how to build things like a movement. And so you actually get all the stuff that deep down people do want, like emotional satisfaction, making money, having friends, getting a fulfilling relationship, like all the stuff that people want.
It's all the stuff you want to do in the system anyways.
Exactly. And
it's no different.
And now, like for myself, I know nobody can take this away from me. It's like I didn't do it on my own, because it was a result of having like-minded people walking together, falling on my face, calling one of you guys, getting feedback. But now it's like, I know how to do it. So it wasn't just, oh, because Jesus said so. Okay, I memorized some stuff. Okay, got it. I'm good. It's like, no, taking the information. I keep taking in the information. I'm processing it. And now different parts of my life are all coming to fruition. And in the past year, it's been nothing short of fucking amazing. And it would be like a miracle in the sense of like, oh my God, that's such a transformation. But it's not a miracle because it can explain exactly how I did it. And that's what we share with people within the Self-Perfected group.
Wait, so you're saying 2020, your life has gotten better?
Yep. Since, especially when COVID hit.
Interesting, huh?
2020 has been like the craziest last year.
So everyone's acting like it's the worst thing ever. But what are they focused on?
Fear, isolation.
What is their purpose? Like, oh, I can't go out anymore.
Purpose.
So it's like, oh, well, I mean, I don't know what to do anymore.
Oh, video games.
You know what I mean? They have no purpose. With us, it's like, okay, this is a challenging situation. How do we keep moving? What do we adjust? How do we change? How do we work harder?
That's what life does. It's like it runs into something, and it's like, how do I grow around this? Or
right.
Around this. And that point, Mitch, it's such a good point. And one of the things that could potentially come up in somebody is like, so what you were saying on that point of, I could actually do more, right? And people might say, yeah, but you're just doing like what they're all doing. The main thing is everybody learning from somebody. They can't do anything different. Like Cameron was saying, after you can go to church for fucking 50 years and you'll never feel confident to get up on the stage and do what the pastor's doing. Versus Cameron, through like just watching you using the tools so that our natural learning abilities open, and we're like downloading. How do you like lead a group? How do you put things together? How do you put together a Facebook group? Like, like these super basic things. We like downloaded it, integrated it, and we're like, oh shit, now we're leading people.
Yeah.
Now we're leading hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Right. Locally and globally. So
and then there's the stuff you're building locally as well that people are not going to see because that's all like sales business stuff, right?
Exactly. And even the clubhouse and all that stuff. And it's like,
yeah, the
main point is, what are you doing? That's the only thing that ever matters. What are you doing? What is the consequence of what you're doing? And I never thought of it like that, about the reason why people are all fucked up with coronavirus is like their purpose was, and this might be stepping on a few toes. It's like, if your purpose is, for people in my circle, like go to soccer, watch sports games, and that shit gets canceled and you're fucked up. Well, it's time to consider who you are, or who you are without those things. Do you like just no longer exist? Like you're just like, oh, what am I supposed to do? Like just be bored.
And for parents, for example, they're like, oh wow, now I have to get stuck at home with my kids. And we're like, cool, we get to spend more time with our kids. Like I don't have a reason not to go out right now. And during the, when everything was locked down or whatever, it was like, cool, we're getting stronger as a family, and it's like, you have a sense of purpose. There's a reason why you're doing what you're doing, but people, and see, this is the problem. They're using the religion to justify it, isn't it? oh, I can just go and do my soccer or whatever the thing is, go to watch my sports on the weekends, do everything. But I'm going to go to church on Sundays, and I believe in Jesus, and I give my life to the Lord, and therefore I'm good. But then the moment something changes in real physical reality, suddenly you're like, oh, everything's terrible. 2020 just can't be over soon enough. It's like, okay, hold on, guys. It's not a bad year because of the numbers 2020. On December 31st, it doesn't suddenly become 2021 and suddenly 2020 is over. Like, yeah, I understand that's how numbers work. That's not how reality works. It's not like, oh, this is just a bad year. It's not. That's not it. Like,
You're just realizing you have a bad life.
you just realized you're
like-
starting to realize what it's like to not be in the 0.1%.
Yeah, it's every year at like I would say after the first quarter, sometime in the second quarter of the year, there's always some meme that goes around about the year.
Yeah.
It's like 2018 was this, oh guys, 2019 went by so quick. Like there's always something every year that the year gets branded as. And I mean 2020 no doubt has its fucking brand, right? Like the year the world shut down or whatever you want to call it. But it's like it's it's so funny that you say that. It's like when it changes to 2021, all your problems aren't going to go away. Right?
But think about this, Asif. What caused more problems for the average person? The virus itself or the shutting down of everything?
Lockdown.
Shutting down, absolutely.
Like
It's so
100%.
fucked.
That was an action that people took.
Mhm.
That's the people who run this world. You're always talking about people who run the world. There's actual people who make the decisions that affect our lives.
It's not God.
If they made different decisions, your life would be different because you're being affected. That's what we mean when we talk about this. Be like, which system are you talking about? That people always say that. I talk about the system, like, which system are you talking about? I'm like, the system, right? The system that everything is a part of, right? Everything,
Darks.
right? You could say there's no system. You could pretend, but how come
That's just
every country did the same thing, basically? And I know there's the exceptions and so forth, but it's like everything is all suddenly like changing altogether.
Man,
That's
it's
what I mean.
crazy. It's so funny now with the internet and digital. All the people are getting creative. Every once in a while, like on a YouTube video, you'll just see like a link posted there. It'll be like a link to like a Google Drive document.
Mhm.
And they're like, I'm just leaving this here, like just in case or something. You click on the document, and I found one of these documents, and it's just links that are all labeled of like, here's Fauci 2 years ago being like the next 4 years ago saying the next administration is going to run into some severe challenges with a global pandemic and they're not going to be prepared for it. And like all these points of like Bill Gates being like, there's going to be this is what I call pandemic 1. There's going to be a pandemic 2, right? And then him talking about like the digital passport. And he's like, he says this in an interview. He's like, we don't want
Herd
recovered
immunity.
people, because he was talking about the point of you can use people who recovered who are immune to do the testing, for example, because then they don't have to change uniforms, all that stuff. They can just do it, right? Because they're invincible in that regard, immune, right? Invincible.
But hold on, but the moment that Trump got it, then they were like, well, how do you know he's actually immune? Like that doesn't prove they can't get it again and all this. So it's like when Bill Gates says it, cool, fact.
But
When
what
it's
Bill
Trump,
Gates
if it
says-
helps Trump, nope, don't talk about it. Huh?
Well, Bill Gates says he's like, but we don't want recovered people. We want, like, we have to distinguish between vaccinated people and recovered people. He's like, we don't want to get to the point where we have a bunch of, and there's a couple of ways that you can interpret it, but basically it was just a bunch of links with information like that. And there's this one video, it's 2 minutes long. I suggest you guys watch it at least. It's Bill Gates. He walks into this like really cool, like futuristic room. It's like this just white table in the middle. And he's explaining how population, and he like 3D printed little pieces of a graph. So he's like making the graph, he's making the graph, right? And I guess for you guys to go like this way.
Yeah.
So he's showing, he's like, population, it's like spiking right now. But what we've noticed is because people's health is better, here's the percentage growth. So this year or this decade, it grew by like 1.3%, and it's like the growth of the population. He's like, I think it's because our health is improving. People are having less kids. So therefore, if we keep improving health and we get, for example, vaccination and things like that, then people will just want to have less kids because we're just a healthier population, and that will even out the growth of the population. And you just think about that for 2 seconds. was the first time within myself. I'm like, oh, I can actually question things, right? It's like I've been talking to more and more people around my age, and a lot of people don't want to have kids, and it's not because they're fucking healthier. It's not. It's because it's a multitude of things. Women don't want to have kids because they want to be working. Men don't want to have kids because they're like, fuck that. They see their parents had a terrible relationship, and they don't want to get married. Or underlying it, the more I talk to these people, if I get one-on-one time, it's because they don't feel prepared. They don't feel like they can do it, right? And all the stress and things like that. But
They're actually
just,
mentally unhealthy.
exactly, and they know that subconsciously, unconsciously, that they're like, there's no fucking way I want to have a kid because I'm gonna fuck them up. Not what the fuck, because their health is improving.
Which, by the way, just
That
for
you
everyone
should
listening,
go after.
that's an excuse not to change.
Mhm.
Because I had the same thought before we had kids too. Because this is a process where you challenge these points. But when I saw that thought, I'm like, but then I would have to change. What, I don't think I can change? Of course I can. Right. So then you become better.
So obviously the point to reflect on is like, yeah, are you actually confident in your ability to change? And realizing that if you don't have these tools, it makes total sense as to why you would say that. Like, I don't
Oh, yeah,
judge
for
that
sure.
point, right? Like, that's where we all started. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I was definitely there. I'm like, I don't know. Because, yeah, the truth is, it's like change isn't sexy. It's hard. But it's like, the fact that it's even possible now, like real change. And I know that people who haven't done this process, they're not going to have the full context to what we mean by change, because we don't just mean going from your income goes from 3,000 to 5,000, or you know what I mean, like life coach change, like you just make a little marginal increase into who you already are. We mean like fundamentally changing what you value, right? But one cool thing that's the first thing when you guys were filling me in, hey, we're talking about this. We were at our clubhouse, right? And Will Gregoire, he's super cool. He's making leaps and bounds. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
But we were talking about the point. I was talking about how the ultimate end of self-interest, if you thought about it logically, it's to do what's best. Because if you're just thinking of yourself, you're gonna end up fucking over people around you, and you're gonna have to taste the consequences of that. So the logical conclusion is, if you wanted to do what's best for yourself, is incorporate everybody around you, right? And so we were talking about that point in the context of a relationship. And I was like, imagine if you're in a relationship, been together for 5 years, you got a place together, whatever, and then you're out on a trip, whatever, and the sexiest celebrity came in. I was like, who's the sexiest celebrity? And there's a couple of guys there. One was Jennifer Lawrence. Okay. One of Megan Fox. I said, okay. So imagine she comes in, she's coming on to you heavy. And she's like, oh my God, like, I really like you. She's like, takes your hand. She brings you to her hotel room, and you're thinking, oh no, like, I'm in a relationship, all this stuff, but it's fucking Megan Fox or whatever. And then you make the decision to do it, right? And you're like, she'll understand. Like, it's a once in a lifetime, huh?
What are you making the decision to do?
To have sex with Megan Fox.
Okay.
Let me be clear, yeah. So to cheat on your girlfriend because you get this once in a lifetime opportunity, right? Or your partner, right? Or your boyfriend, right? Leonardo DiCaprio or Brad Pitt or whoever you like, George Clooney, maybe he's super old for you. I don't know. Like,
George
who are the
Clooney,
young ones?
Jesus.
Who are the young ones?
Fucking
Young celebrities.
skeleton.
Who are the kids from Paw Patrol again? No, but like, the young, whatever. So you go home thinking, my partner will understand. And then you get there and they're like, no, I don't fucking care. Like, why the fuck would you do that? We're over. Like, I can't trust you. Because there's some point within you that if you feel a certain way about it, then you're willing to break our agreement. So I don't know where that line is. Like, how hot does she have to be? You know what I'm like? I can't trust you anymore. How hot does he have to be? I can't trust you anymore. So then all your friends are like, what the fuck? You lose your health, your emotional stability that you were getting from your partner. Maybe you guys had a good agreement, all that stuff. Being self-interested only, it fucks you over. And so we were talking about that point, and one of the guys, they're like, yeah, but why would I even be in a relationship? I would still like, he didn't even get to that point. He was like, well, why would I be in that relationship? Why would you ever be in one person relationship? I'm like, oh, this is a great opportunity, because that's exactly how I used to think. It's exactly how I used to think, right? And I think remember before we made the podcast, we actually all five plus Kian got together and we did like a relationships video. We should post that one day as like a bonus like podcast because it was really cool. A lot of people really liked it. But I was sharing
on
about
YouTube or something.
It is. It's called Why Your Relationships Are Fucked.
But yeah, we could post it as an episode. That's a good idea.
as like self-perfected, yeah, like bonus.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was talking about like my mentality of like I'm just going to be a bachelor my whole life. Of course, I would never get married, right? And I only started considering it after talking with you. You mentioned a couple of key points, which maybe we'll talk about in the future, relationships specifically. But basically, what it came down to, and this is how it relates back to God in the Bible. Okay, full fucking circle, baby.
Callback.
He was what? What did you say?
I said callback.
Callback, rollback, Walmart. He was realizing, because I was just sharing my story, right? And this person was realizing, hey, I see, like, it's because my parents had a terrible fucking relationship and they were always fighting all the time. So I was like, yeah, why would I ever want that? And he was becoming aware of that. And he's like, huh, that's interesting. Like, it doesn't have to be that way, right? And he's like, all right, but I see that I got that from my parents. Then we kind of kept going. And he's like, hey, wait, let me share something. The biggest problem, or another big problem that I had, or the reason why I became really resentful of religion, is because the reason they were staying together is because God said so. And I was like, oh, and I know exactly what he's talking about. I have, aunties, uncles who have a terrible fucking relationship, terrible relationship, but they're still together because if they within themselves are like, if we divorce, we're going to hell. You know what I mean? It's like you're living in hell right now. But the point is, we started talking about principles, right? And there are people who think that if I just follow the principles, everything's going to work out. If we just implement laws in society and just enforce them top down, people's got to do it. But the main thing, right, is trying to follow principles without understanding. It's never going to work. It's never, ever, 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 ever going to work because you don't actually get it. You don't actually know what you're doing. You're still just a slave. You're not processing the points. And what I see is the ultimate fault of religion. It's the extreme of don't think. Just
it's the rules to control the people who are not going to consider things and take responsibility. So it's like, it's not about bashing religion, right? Like you're saying, it's just seeing that, trying to hold on to it as if there's some value, and it's like, well, but there's good things in religion. Okay, fine.
Of course,
take those things. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just go look at the Destiny principles. It's all right there. Like, name one you disagree with, and name one that's in your religion that's a principle that you can prove is best for all that's not on there. That's the whole point of it. It's not about religion that you follow. It's about consider these and look at the principles of it. I wanted to ask you something, okay? And this, I guess, for anybody, but what does it mean to have a terrible relationship?
Well, my idea of it, when I think of like the images that come into my head, is always fighting with no solution. Always fighting. It's the same fight over and over again, where there's not.
Why do people fight?
Because they're not on the same page.
What does that mean?
They don't have. What I see is because they don't have a purpose within their relationship. Everybody's just trying to do their own thing. And because
what are they trying to get? When you fight, you're fighting over something.
Mm-hmm.
What are you fighting for?
Being right.
To win. Yeah.
Isn't that it?
Yeah. I remember I don't know why, reflecting on it, I remember thinking about that point because like years ago, you're like, because in one of your videos, you're talking about, you have to let go of the point of wanting to be right all the time. It's like, why the fuck would I not want to be right? Why would I? Oh, so you're saying that even if what I'm saying is true, it's like I have to like lie and say that like, oh no, I'm not right. I went into the polarity. It's like just give up all your power. But that's not what you're saying. It's like this thing starts running through you of like I have to dominate this person. Like I have to make this person like less than me.
Well, I'll give you an example. Last night, it was like probably 8:30 or so, and Katie was doing some of the dishes, and I was playing with Max, and he wanted me to trace like some of these little cartoon type things
Mhm.
and color them in and then cut them out. And that's something I've been doing with him a lot lately. And we were doing that for a bit, and then I could tell there was going to be like more he wanted to do. So I was like, hey, look, let's take a break. I said, it's late. I said, look at the clock. What time is it? Right. And he could see what time it was. I said, so let's take a break, and we'll do some of this tomorrow. I'll do more tomorrow, but I know that you're going to want a whole bunch of these. So but it's already getting kind of late, and there's some other things I need to do after you go to bed. Okay, so let's just take a break. We'll go upstairs. We'll read some books, all that kind of thing. And he was like, no, that's just what you want to do. I don't want to do that. Okay, so he said, you're just wanting to do what you want to do, and so that means you should just not do it. Right? That's what Max said, right? And and oh yeah, you guys are coming down here soon. You'll get to see. It's really cool. Max is like really cool. And anyway, so I was like, all right. I was like, well, I said, it's not just that I don't want to do it. It's because it's close to bedtime, or it is bedtime, and you need to put you go to bed and all this stuff, right? And he was like, yeah, well, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this, right? He was like, and he's really good. He'll be like, it's just a few things, like, it will be quick, and then we can play with them upstairs. We can go take them upstairs, And I was like, well, I was like, no, I said it'd be best to go to bed, Max, because it's late. And I gave him the reasons again, right? And Katie's doing the dishes, and he goes, well, maybe Katie can do it then, right? And I was like, well, no, she's doing the dishes right now. And he goes, well, maybe she could take a break and she could do it, right? And I was like, well, no, it's bedtime. I was trying to repeat again, right? Remind him. And then he was like, Katie, because she was like listening to some video while she was doing dishes, and she like stops and she's like, yeah, what's up? And he was like, can you explain what you want her to do? And as like the natural parent programming would be like, don't just ask your mother because I said no or whatever, but I don't do that, right? I just listen to what is going to happen, right? Because I'm not worried about it. You know what I mean? I'm not like, oh, no, we got it. It's just more like I see the point that needs to be done, and that's what I'm directing. And that doesn't mean he's going to necessarily agree with me. And I told him, I'm not going to force you. However, and I repeat the point. So anyway, so he's asking Katie, and she stops what she's doing, and she goes like, well, right now I'm focused on doing the dishes. And she didn't hear what we were talking about because she had the headphones on, because he had to like speak loud to get her attention, right? She was like, well, right now I need to get some of these dishes done, so I'm not going to do that right now. And I don't remember exactly what Max said next, but she was like, she looked at me and she goes, it'll only take a few minutes, right? And she said, also, he's been really patient, like with Seneca, because Seneca was going through, I think she's like teething or something. So she's going through like crying a little bit throughout the day. She's like, he's been really patient. He's like, so, you should also be patient with him. Right. And I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, all right. And then like Max looks at me and he goes, it makes sense, right? I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. Right. So then, we took a few more minutes, did the thing, and then we went upstairs. It wasn't a big deal. Right.
Wow.
But
I feel all the things come up of like, are you going to undermine my authority? Like all that kind of stuff.
All of that stuff. I mean, there's so many points, right? Like that's one. Another one, just like, which is like, no, I'm, because that's kind of like another layer.
Yeah.
But it comes down to like, no, I'm right. Like it is bedtime, and I didn't feel any of that. It was just in the moment before he talked to Katie. I wasn't considering. There was more like a fear that, well, if I agree to do it for a minute, then he's going to ask me again, and he's going to ask me again. He's going to keep asking me. Really, it's like if I say yes now, it's never going to be. I'll never be able to say no to him. That's where the mind wants to go, right? But in that moment, when Katie said all that, I was like, okay, all right, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I agree. I don't go, well, since Katie said we could, or anything like that. It's just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we'll do a few. and then we'll go up, right? And then it was fine, right? And then it was interesting because when we went to bed, I don't even think I turned the light on. I can't remember. But when we got in bed, or no, I did. We read a book. We just kind of looked through some of the book that we were reading. And then as soon as I turned off the light, he fell asleep like that, which is not normal. Normally he'll ask me to tell him stories and we talk a little bit and he kind of lays awake for a while, but he fell asleep like right away. So that was interesting. But
In terms of like timing, it all worked out. Like,
yeah,
it
I mean, like meaning
Yeah.
even if it hadn't, it wouldn't have mattered,
A small thing,
but you know,
a
yeah.
little
So,
fluff.
you know, and by the way, like parenting is not easy.
Hmm.
And I don't want people to think that just because we do a really great job, that it's easy. It's harder. It's harder to do a really great job. It's like, how much harder does the guy who's super ripped in the gym work than the guy who's not?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a lot harder to do that. It doesn't mean it has to be easy just because it's the best thing. It's the hardest thing to do. Just like standing up and changing the system is the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest possible thing any of us can all do together with our lives. The easier thing would just be to go join a church and go be in part of that religion and just accept all the things and then just continue on as is and to make all the
Oh.
excuses.
And you know it's super pervasive within I'll just talk about Islam and Christianity. It's like don't question your parents. Like obedience to your parents is like of utmost virtue. So it's like in that context of what was just happening, it's like that would have never happened. I just say no because I said so, and it's like go. But you put that together with the concept from the Bible of the sins of the fathers. It's like you have to, if your fathers are imposing sin onto you, you just have to accept it.
I want to, you know how Avery always says that, you know, when we have technotutor, for example, when you use it with your kids, that you need to use it yourself because otherwise they'll surpass you and they'll lose respect, which is something Bernard said too. And it just makes sense, right?
Hmm.
I just had a realization while you were saying that, because the parent who says, well, just do it because I said so, right? We don't do that. We don't say because I said so. Even if it's like, I have no idea how to get him to do this right now, and we just need to do it because I'm tired or whatever. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to explain why. And I know that parents will be like, well, at a certain point, then they're not going to listen to you anymore. And it's like, that's assuming I'm just going to stay like I am. You know what I mean? Like, meaning, well, at a certain, because what I was going to say is, man, when he's 8 years old, I'd rather him be able to really effectively argue with me about why he should or shouldn't do something. Not like out of spite arguing just because like, well, no, I don't want to do it, but more like a being able to be like, well, but explain why you're saying I should do this. And if at a certain point he's smarter than I am, that's a problem, isn't it? That's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a certain point where it's like, that's what I want, right? But not really. I want him to be smarter when he's 8 than I am now. But that doesn't mean, but see, the implication is that I'm going to just
Stop.
some point he's
Yeah.
going to be smarter than
And
me.
then
It's
you
like,
just
why-
start declining, right? And
I'm
then you
getting
got-
smarter every day.
I'm
I'm getting smarter. I'm getting better every day. So I'm applying it to myself as well.
Yeah.
So
I
the
just-
parent's fear is that, well, if I relinquish authority, the child will then just get past me someday. It's like, are you not a directive person? Like, you think an 8-year-old who's really intelligent is going to be able to direct you? So the only way you can have control is if they're a retard. Like that's essentially how parents think, but it's not even it's not even a real thought process. It's just
Yeah.
a automatic
Yeah.
acceptance at subconscious, unconscious levels of the way everything is. Then they just impose. And that's the same thing with the Bible and religion, and all that stuff. There's so much you're accepting unconsciously, subconsciously that you're programmed with in that stuff that you don't even realize that you're doing. What were you
That
saying?
was so brilliant, man. Like I never thought of it like that. Where as soon as you said when he's 8, what would be way better is if he could talk about what he wants. When you're like, it should be like this, and he's like, it should be like this for these reasons, and you're like, oh, you're right. And then you grow. It's like now you have, 2 of you who are just constantly progressing, right? It just makes so much sense about why you would want your kid to be smarter than you. Smarter, not like he's just an argumentative, know it all, like blah blah blah. I mean,
not like smart ass, like actually understands.
yeah,
things.
exactly. Like they understand reality and they see things. They, you guys are always going to have different perspectives because you have different lives. So now you guys are both adding your perspectives and you guys are both getting smarter. And being smart is like seeing that it makes sense to discuss things, to talk with other people, to learn new things and see how you can grow and overcome. It's like, dude, if you could have that with your kid, I don't
Dude,
even think that's possible. Ever.
that's so cool because that's like your family just becomes your greatest advisors,
Yeah, exactly.
right? It's like
Yeah.
you have that relationship with your spouse and then with your children. And then it's like as you grow more and more, it's like you are all becoming more effective.
Guys, look at Trump.
Yeah.
That's what he's got.
Yeah.
That's
He's
pretty
got
cool.
he's got his daughter and her husband like in the government, like working alongside, getting peace deals done over here, getting prison reform done over there, doing all this stuff. And I know people want to talk all kinds of shit because they're jealous. But the reality is, like, you don't have that. You know what I mean? When the person who's criticizing, they don't have any of that. Their family doesn't even like them.
Like if I just look at that objectively, like forget, just remove all the names.
Remove all the negative politics stuff. Yeah,
Like forget the names. It's just like,
Yeah.
that's pretty fucking epic.
it's really fucking cool.
Like being able to work with my brother, it's fucking epic.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to work with your spouse, your kids, like, like that. And then my brother's kid, like that is epic. That's really cool. That's really cool.
It's going to be really cool just from the starting point of if you germinate from this starting point, right? Then even your extended family is more likely, if they're walking the principles, they're not getting sucked into like this whole emotional thing, then they're also going to be like real family, like that you can depend on. It's really creating a network out in the world. And it's just, that's how you create like an elite family for real, It's really cool.
Well, when you guys have kids, then they'll be a part of the peer group with my kids.
That's right.
So it'll be even stronger than that.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? Because they'll all have the same principles. Imagine growing up with this all the time.
Yeah.
And like thinking about it all the time. And I don't know if I posted a video of Max playing a little game on my phone on the distributor page. Y'all probably saw that, right? Did you hear what he was listening to in the background?
Yeah.
You heard it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was listening to Science and Language and an Equal Money System.
Yeah.
And I think it turned on by accident because he was messing with my phone, like trying to get the little circuit game he was wanting to play. And it like turned on. And then so he's like listening to Bernard talking about vocabulary, like while he's playing this game. He never asked me to turn it off or anything.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So it's just, you start looking at that. I'm like, man, imagine it from a young age being able to consider these points.
Yeah, it's like part of his environment. Versus me at like, what is it, like 19, trying to listen to Bernard audio and be like, oh, he's attacking me. Like he doesn't know me, he can't see me, but he's fucking me up.
Anybody who wants to say like, oh, you're brainwashing all this stuff, it's like, do your kids watch TV? Have you ever let them watch a commercial?
Or YouTube, yeah. YouTube's like the hot thing for kids.
I mean, I pay $20 a month for my YouTube just so our kids don't ever have to see any ads whatsoever.
That's cool.
And that doesn't mean we just give it to them and there you go. But I'm still, those ads will pop up, right? If you don't have the premium or whatever, right? So I don't want them exposed to that, but then you drive down the road and then there's billboards, right? Impulsing, right? And they pick up on it.
Me and Mailat, we were looking up, I was looking up internet because we're moving on Saturday. Mitch, you just moved into your new place too, man. Congrats.
I got my 5G now.
Are you there right now?
I am, yeah.
Oh, I know you guys kept mentioning that, but it didn't register for me that you actually moved into your own place now. I just clicked.
Yesterday, yeah.
I was so used to like you going back and forth in the past few months.
I know.
Okay, you're in another place right now, but I'm like, no,
glitchy.
you're actually in your own place. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so now it's like the real
You
headquarters.
know what's funny? Mitchell, of all people, have the biggest reason. What I was thinking about, just to say this real quick, like Mitchell, of all people, have the biggest reason to be like, yo, 2020 was a fucking wash. Like,
Why?
What?
Why?
Because his city started burning down and he had to like you know what I mean? Like he got thrown into the most chaos, but he's like,
okay, but just real quick,
certainty
Mitch,
is
give people, you don't have to give them like the how you met Kian and Asif and all that, but like what specific points, like just real quick, walk us through like, okay, I did this, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, until to the point you're at now. Would you mind just doing that?
Yeah. So like, if we go back to the beginning of this episode, grew up going to church, like thinking, okay, there's this God thing outside me, then started questioning it, all that stuff, right? Went on this whole spiritual journey, all this bullshit, learned about business, wanted to be a psychologist because I thought that's how you could impact people's lives, right? Then I was like, well, no, I need to do business, all that, right? So like, fast forward, got exposed to GIN, Global Information Network, which is then where I met all you guys back in Denver a year and a half ago. Then met Max as well. And I was like, damn, this kid is 2.5. And we had a full-on conversation. He was asking me about my gasoline engine in my car and like trying to understand the details of that. And because asked if you're like, oh, you got to meet Max. I was like, what the fuck is this group? Y'all keep talking about this Techno Tutor thing. I don't know what this is. Then I met this lady who was a lawyer and she used Techno Tutor. I met other people who were using it for investing and finance. I'm like, okay, I thought this was just like a kid's tool. This seems pretty cool. So then I got Techno Tutor for myself and I said, let me just put in all my goals, dreams, everything, rebuild my foundation, all that stuff. I went ham. I did like 3 hours a day of Techno Tutor. Then my entire life fell apart, actually. My businesses all got stalled. PayPal did all this shit. I had like 25 grand sitting in the bank, frozen. I was like, what? Then Asim was like, hey, you should listen to Revenge of the Ego by Bernard Pullman. And I was like, this guy looks like he's the devil. Like, this guy looks scary. He sounds like the devil. Why would I listen to Revenge of the Ego? Because then my ego's going to take revenge on me and everything's going to fall apart because I think I now have momentum, right? Little did I know that was my ego taking revenge. So funny. If that didn't make sense, re-listen to that. So then
hang on, Mitch, because you said like you met all these people, you got Techno Tutor, put all your goals in, went ham, and then you said all your business is stalled. But you forgot to mention the part before then of like what happened to your business before.
How did you make all that money in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
Where you got 25K being held.
Well, so that it was actually first I put it all in Techno Tutor because I was like going ham with Kevin Trudeau's newsletter, trying to read my self-image, say it out loud 3 times, all that, whatever. Trying to program myself in my subconscious because I realized my subconscious mind is sabotaging me and I didn't know how to fix it. Then I realized, oh, Techno Tutor is doing something on the subconscious. Cool. So then I had been making a little bit of money. And then I was like, no, I'm ready to take this thing to the next level. So I went ham on Techno Tutor. Then things got stalled, basically. It all kind of fell apart. And then I had to face this moment where I had talked, I think, to all you within the span of a week. I was like, what the fuck? Like, why is this not working? But then I realized, I was like, wait, this is that moment for myself where I get to realize, who am I? Am I going to be the kind of person who gives up? Or am I going to be the kind of person who sits down and just thinks it through and figures it out? Then I got help from you guys to actually change my goal, all that. And then it was like, bam, everything came in. Started making like a couple $1,000s a day in profit. And I'm like, okay, cool. It worked. Okay, good. I just had to like go through that process of, because it was like, I couldn't handle, at my current rate of living, I couldn't handle just trying to fit everything into that box, if that makes sense. It was like, no, I had to have everything shatter and break to then get rebuilt as now who I am has all this programming of like, okay, cool. So then business really started increasing. And then I realized, okay, this was around November of last year. So it hasn't even been a year. I was like, as if you had told me, you're like, dude, so you see Techno Tutor works now, right? I'm like, yeah, obviously. You're like, okay. Now, who would you be if you didn't start sharing this with people? Like, think about how much of a selfish asshole you would be. You basically said that. You said it in a way where you got me to realize I was a selfish asshole for not sharing it. Because I'm like, this is.
That's not what I said, for the record. I'm not that.
As if from day one, I was trying to tell him how like everything's energy or some bullshit. He's like, you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. And I was like, how dare you? But I was like, but he seemed pretty fucking certain. And I wasn't as certain as he was that everything's energy. He's like, no, everything's actually physical. Energy is real. but it's a physical thing. And so we, ever since day one, Aspen and I have kind of gone back and forth, but it's been like,
You're a genius. That's why.
well, and I'm teachable, where most
Yeah,
people
exactly.
would just be like, well, fuck you, Kevin Trudeau said something different. Not realizing that Kevin actually does say everything's physical, but they miss it in your wish is your command. Anyway.
That's the
Now-
God, right? That's the same thing as like being like, oh, but God said, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm the one with the problem. I'm coming to you for advice. You're telling me something, and I'm like, "Oh, you don't know. You don't know. I know." It's like, okay,
Yeah,
just
on to
continue
the
along
next
with your
guru.
problems. Then fuck off. I don't care.
Exactly. And I've been so fed up because I had investigated as much as I possibly could. So I was like, I want to have a fucking awesome life. I want to be married. I want to have kids one day. I want my kids to be like Max. Like Max was smart and he was 2. So then I was like, okay, let me just listen to these people and apply what they're saying. Then November rolls around and I was like, I gotta learn how to, like, who would I need to be to actually sell TechnoTutor? To like go into a family's home and explain to them why this thing is better than the school system that they have their kids in. And I was like, God, that sounds like a fucking challenge, but like, let's do it. So I went ham again on TechnoTutor, put in all the stuff that I wanted, as my programming. And it like, I had a few learning experiences. I mean, it's all learning experience, but like a few where like I didn't really explain it very well. Then all of a sudden again, it clicked. Bam. I had like 3 sales in 2 weeks of really cool people. Some of them I just met. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. So then January rolls around though. And e-commerce business was doing really good, but I was like, I need to put that on the back burner because that shit doesn't really matter. I'm promoting consumerism. All this shit's coming from China. It's ending up in some landfill. Like people don't really need the shit I'm selling. It's cool because I know I need to be rich to change the world. But am I going to be rich just doing basic e-commerce shit? Or am I going to actually figure out how to build a sales team and reform education, not just in Minnesota, but around the world? So I went in.
How many people, sorry to interrupt, but how many people are doing the e-commerce thing and probably there's some of them that are really making a lot of money, but they don't give a fuck what the consequence is.
Exactly.
They really don't care.
Or
Or
they're
they'll
like,
justify it.
Yeah, I'll get rich and then I'll figure it out. It's like, that's absolute bullshit. Because that's how I thought for so long.
But what you don't realize, or not you personally, but they don't realize is the way they got rich, not necessarily itself directly, but it's contributing to the programming of society so that it's even harder to change it later.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? It's like the way, because you're playing into the system of competition and you're only reinforcing it. You're not preparing anybody to ever do anything differently. You just made it hard. Like how much harder is it to support a child to change today where they have an iPhone with Twitter and TikTok and whatever the fuck on it?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is that 7-year-old going to be exposed to by the time they're 7 years old now versus, when I grew up and we didn't even have cell phones.
Exactly. And I'm so glad that you guys had brought that up enough times and I had TechnoTutor so I could actually start to process it. Like I remember Asif, we'd have some phone calls at night. I'd be like 3 hours and I would just be walking around outside and you'd just be like, we'd just be talking about stuff. And it was like, I could feel my brain starting to make these connections. It was like, this is fucking cool. And then you helped me realize different basically bullshit beliefs I was holding on to. And then you would type out a list for me of stuff to put in TechnoTutor. And I would have flashbacks of like, oh my God, when I was in high school and I took a psychology class and then in university, I was like, I want to be like a therapist because I could like help people. Thinking that was the answer. I was like, this is what S is actually doing for me.
Yeah.
Really change it. And I would just do one list for like 20 minutes in TechnoTutor and my life would be different because I would then show up and actually do the thing differently. And it was so cool. So then
the whole point is you could take responsibility for yourself and then you did all by yourself.
Exactly. And then,
it's more like you're just the sounding board of just, okay, but here's what you're really saying.
Yeah.
It's not I'm telling you what it is and what it means and what you should do. It's more like, hold on, here's what you're telling me, but here's what you're actually saying. Like, you're afraid of this. And they're like, oh yeah. And because you have the vocabulary of doing DIP and all that, you're like, okay, so that's memory. It is related to that. And then you start taking it apart. And then that's when you go do the work. Like the counseling session is where you just start to kind of uncover things. Who goes to a counseling session and then goes home and does 15 times the amount of that time in actually working on the point?
Like that's what they want you to do in university. Go to class and then go home and do like all the study and stuff like that. But I remember it was only somewhere around that time, Mitchell, that I realized that you wanted to be a psychologist. I'm like, dude, that's what I wanted to be when I started, right? I was like, I want to take psychology and learn all this stuff. So it's so cool when you told me that.
Yeah, because this is the real psychology, because you're actually getting to the root, and then you change your life, and then your life changes, which is, in theory, that's the real goal of psychology. But we don't have to do that right now.
Let's just let them tell it.
But then in January, then I was like, okay, Cameron and Katie, they've got something going on for them. This is really cool to see. Plus, I was a distributor, so I got to see more of how they're doing things. And I was like, I definitely want to have. I want to be married.
You mean when you came to visit us?
When I came to visit back in January, so this was like
This year.
That
was right before we all went to Mexico.
Yes, exactly. And so I was like, okay, I wanted to learn how you guys parent, just general life advice, and then also how to do the office recruiting and everything to build the TechnoTutor business locally.
Yeah.
And it was so phenomenal. Just conversations with you, with Katie,
with Max.
talking with Max. What was that?
Conversation with you, with Katie, with Max.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, this is what the new family looks like. Like, I had never seen a family that actually enjoyed being with each other and challenged each other and kept improving, and then would challenge me and then would be open to what I would say. And it was like this cool team dynamic that was forming. I was like, I need to have, I demand of myself that I create this for my family. Like, I'm not going to accept anything less than the standard, because it's just who am I really? Am I going to be the kind of person that's okay with mediocrity? Fuck no. I'm going to do my best. Then come back. So that was the first time I heard coronavirus was at your house, Cameron. You're like, yeah, there's like this thing in China happening. And at least I'm pretty sure, because it was right around that time in January. Right?
Yeah, because when we went to Mexico, I already knew about it.
Yeah.
Because I remember Seneca got sick the night right before we left, and it was just like some kind of fever. It was nothing to do with that, obviously. But I remember that point of coronavirus coming up, and I was like looking, and I was like, oh yeah, wasn't that a thing? So then I started looking online, and I wasn't thinking that's what she had. It was just, it made that connection because she was sick. So I went and looking online, and there was like all these cases popping up around the world. And I'm like, man, something's definitely going on there. Like, going on or whatever, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Cause then I was like, okay, there's this coronavirus thing, but I didn't really think twice about it. And then I was like, I'm going to build this thing. Like, I'm going to build TechnoTutor into an empire as a distributor. And so that was cool. Then we went to Gin, met some new people, and I was like, okay, this is really working. Fast forward then, so going pretty much all out with that. But then I was like, oh my God, coronavirus, like lockdowns happening, things like that. It's like I had every excuse to not do TechnoTutor. Of like, oh, just wait till coronavirus is over. And then, yeah. But I was like, I would just work through that stuff on my own. Then next big milestone was then got really clear on my relationship and just realized like, okay, Jessica and I are in the same city, makes a lot of sense. She's like into Gin. She's like more teachable than I am. We would talk about like Destiny, Bernard. I was like, hey, you should watch like a Resonant Seed by Bernard Pullman. She's like, yeah, I watched it like twice. I took notes on everything. I was like, damn, like that's so cool. And so then it's like, okay, we need to be together. Formed our relationship in April.
But do you remember, sorry to interrupt again, but do you remember when you asked me about it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could share what you got from that. Because I want people to see, like, I didn't really tell you what to do.
Yeah. Because I talked with Ken. I think I talked with Asif. And then I know I talked with you, Cameron, and with Katie. I remember, Cameron, you didn't give me clear advice on like, you should do it or shouldn't do it. I just remember being very common sense. I remember Katie, she called me on a few things of like, yo, you're like, you got to get clear on that.
Yeah.
Like it was just so direct. I was like, God, this is so great. Like, I'm so used to having people around me just like, oh yeah, like go with your feelings, like bullshit. And so that was cool. Then the next big point though was, I believe it was May, where then George Floyd was killed. And that was very close to where we were living at the time in our office.
Well, correct. He died in police custody.
Oh, right.
Just to be clear.
Exactly. Whatever the exact wording is. Next thing you know, it was like it happened. And I remember that night we were like visiting my parents for dinner. And, you know, we're like, oh yeah, did you see that video? Like that was pretty fucked up.
They fucked up, yeah.
And then I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, there's probably going to be riots. Then the next day, some people came in who were, you know, just people at the WeWork building. They're like, oh yeah, like I went out to the riots last night. Like it was like, there's a lot of people out there, like they're smashing cop cars. Like it's going to be bigger tonight.
I think they were calling it protests at the time.
Oh yeah. It was protests where they were telling me about
Peaceful
how they had
protests.
bricks and they were throwing up their cop car
Yeah,
windows.
exactly.
I was like, okay.
More like a protest.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I was like, okay, there's,
And then the next night they burned down a fucking police station.
Yeah,
I remember that. It was
and
insane.
that- because I remember I was talking with John, who's part of TechnoTutor, and he was like, yeah, I have friends who are out there. And he was saying it was weird. There was a peaceful protest going on. And then this dude came up with like this, they got a picture of him. He has like this highlighter yellow thing. He looked like a professional. And he goes in and he just starts smashing windows just like a pro. And everyone's like, wait, what the, like, why the fuck are you smashing these windows? And then he just like goes off. And John's like, that could have been a police, that could have been professional, like whatever you'd call
Agitator.
it. Yeah, agitator, or who knows what it was. But that's when I was like, okay, this is about to get bad. Then the next morning we woke up, a neighbor's apartment's on fire. There's
It could have been
helicopters
someone
everywhere.
that the business people asked to do it so they can get insurance money.
Exactly.
No one fucking knows, but it's
Yeah.
like it's insane, right?
And,
Anyways.
and so I had never been exposed to riots that close and up front, like you hear about on the news, but it's another thing when then you it's like it's literally all around you. And you were in an apartment basically in the middle of the city.
Just
I'm
repeat
like,
what you said when you woke up. You saw what? It just kind of got drowned.
yeah, so our
You saw
neighbor's
Jesus'
apartment,
face?
basically the blood of Christ was everywhere. So then our neighbor's apartment like goes up in flames at like 9 a.m. in the morning. I was like, that's sketchy. Like you'd think if that were to happen, that'd be kind of like a midnight 1 a.m. thing. It was like, they should all be going to sleep by now. No, it was like, oh shit. And then so I got Citizen app, and because I was trying to do a office presentation that day. I was like, that ain't gonna be a good impression. They're like coming, there's like smashed windows everywhere. I was like, okay, let's postpone it. And so again, I had all the excuse to stop building TechnoTutor. And then God, what was it then? I've downloaded Citizen app though, because I was like, maybe Jess and I should get out of the city for the next few days, because it was just going into the weekend. I was like, I'm not trying to catch a stray bullet or something. And I'm looking on Citizen app, and it's like, last seen 2 minutes ago, 4 axe-wielding men seen broken into local bank. And it was the bank literally like 200 feet from our front door. I'm like, I'm not trying to see axe-wielding men. Like, so we packed up our stuff, got out of the city for a few days.
And you told me like somebody got like their car stolen, like just live.
Well, so that was after the decision to defund the police app. So okay, so God, it keeps going, right? I forgot all this. So this has been 2020, right? So this is now end of May, June, and I had to innovate again on how to keep spreading TechnoTutor. So did a bit more
business, yeah.
online stuff, and then just found a different office downtown. So yeah, getting innovative, right? Kept building the business, kept expanding. Then the decision was made to defund the police. Then I don't even know if the police actually got defunded. I haven't looked into it because there was some nuance with it, or like how the funding was being reallocated. But I do know that crime shot up massively. In 1 week, there was, for example, a teenager was driving his convertible like 4 p.m. in the afternoon and literally got pulled out of the car by a group of people. And then they just jumped in his car and drove off.
It's like GTA 5.
Yeah, Domino's driver got carjacked in the middle of the day. And then the one that was sealed the deal for me, because like Jessica was with me, and I was like, Jess, like, just don't go outside. And especially when it got dark, it was like we would used to go on walks at night, but it was like, no, not an option. So what sealed the deal for me though was that in the parking lot attached to our apartment, there was like 3 apartments, and one guy was sitting there waiting or something, and 3 people came up, all with guns drawn on him, told him to get out of the car. They maced him and then drove off with his car. I was like, I've literally sat in that parking lot before. So
Mace
okay.
seemed a little excessive.
Yeah, like they already got the car, but
Come on, man.
I don't know. So that's what started happening around Uptown, which is the part of Minneapolis that I was in. And in those moments, I would have this decision of like, who am I? Am I going to be the kind of person who says, well, city's going to shit, can't really do much about it? You know, I'm looking at like how Jacob Fry, the mayor, is like under scrutiny. And then all this shit, like what Tim Walz is doing, if they're accepting federal troops, things like that. And I'm like, would I be able to be in that position? Could I stand there under all that fire and do what's best? And at the moment I had to look at it, I'm like, I have a fuckload of work to do, but let me be that kind of person. And then some. Like, how would I handle this if I were responsible for a city or whatever? So that was really cool to see, because again, I had another excuse to say, oh, well, you know, I could just go sell TechnoTutor to other people. But I was like, no, I'm going to still figure out a way where we can build this even more in the city, because we clearly need it. The current level of vocabulary of most people in the city is like not high enough to be able to even understand how do we change a system so that police brutality isn't even a thing, or, you know, whatever. Then
real quick on that, it's like,
yeah.
If people had a high vocabulary, wouldn't the natural response be like, okay, clearly we need to change some things in the laws and so forth around policing. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to run for office this year.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they're just like, let's just go break shit, and then that somehow will make people want to change stuff. And it's like,
yeah. So it was really cool. In the aftermath of that, we had a series of these meetups, and I started them with John, who's part of the TechnoTutor team, and we would bring in different people from the city, and we would talk about different solutions that we see, like different types of community centers, and how, you know, fundamentally education is what's going to support us to get to the next level as a community. And there was another guy there where he was saying, if you want to go out protest, get attention, sure, but you got to follow that up with paper. And how many of y'all were at the city council meeting? He's like calling everyone out. He's like, I was actually at the city council meeting. And so it was cool to see that I basically got exposed to a lot more of the people within the city that have a higher sense of understanding, like who are the organizations, who are the people in power, the people responsible. And then I just realized this is what I need to do. I need to take on even more responsibility and be a stable point for the community through providing TechnoTutor to people and distributing this thing. And then within that, we build community of like-minded people who want to grow and advance themselves. So that was like July, August or so. And then we came to Houston again, and Drake was there. Well, Drake, you actually visited too back in April as well, before all that happened.
That's right.
And then it was just like all these times where I had the excuse able for me, like, okay, if I were just Christian faith believing person, I would have all the freaking excuses to say, well, it's in God's hands. God's going to handle it. I'm just going to sit back on the sidelines and pray, and it's in God's will. As opposed to, no, I'm going to go out there. And even though I know the city's still on edge and it's kind of sketchy, it's best to move the office downtown. And even if I have to stay late at night and work, I'm going to use common sense. But like, I'm not just hiding away. It's about now going out there and now going out door knocking, going out talking to salespeople, like really building this thing at a grassroots level. And it's been the best thing ever. Now, then the final part to this whole series of events is then Jess and I looked at the common sense of, okay, move out of Uptown, because it just wasn't a good place, because we know we want to have kids. And so then we found a spot. We're still technically in Minneapolis, but it's a bit more family friendly, where we have our own home, backyard, and all that. So made the decision to make that happen. Again, use TechnoTutor, pulled apart all my excuses, put in exactly what I wanted, how I wanted things to go, and all like to a T happened. And so, and throughout the whole time we've been doing the Self-Perfected meetup, launched the podcast, have the Self-Perfected store so people can get t-shirts. And just now it's at the point where I'll have people reaching out to me on Facebook, and they're like, hey, I saw one of your videos. I think TechnoTutor sounds cool. Can we jump on a call? I'll talk to them for a little bit, then have one Zoom call, and they're like, yeah, I need this thing. like, just send it to me in the mail. I don't care how much it is.
That's pretty
I'm like, and it's just because it's who I am now. It just comes naturally. And so that's what's possible, where a year and a half ago, I was a fucking loser. And I was thinking that the answer to everything was like, feel enough light and love and meditate in a certain way where it will like raise the vibration of some shit. But I promise you, no amount of raising vibration is going to go out there and door knock and then talk to some family about why their kid who's having behavior problems is actually having a problem in school, and we can address that with TechnoTutor. No amount of meditation will do that. But now I just see it's common sense. It's actually so much fun. So that was my journey
You know what,
to
you
here.
know what really struck me, dude? When you said that, you know, the distributor talk, you said that was in November. That wasn't even a year ago. I was like, holy shit, dude. I've only known you for like a year and a bit. Like,
Mhm.
I remember just from going from the Denver event to the February event in Mexico. It was like, before that event, I saw you one time, I saw you one weekend, but you're just like a best friend. Like, you're just like, Mitchell, good to see you again, man. Let's go. Like,
See what
how's
I
it-
mean, though? When you
Like-
align with the principles, it's like suddenly it's just normal.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like the time doesn't even matter. Like it's not even relevant. But then it just pops into my head. I'm like, that's how people usually measure their friendship or their trust or their, development or whatever. It's like, who cares about time? Time doesn't fix anything. And just to recognize that it hasn't even been a year, or it's coming up to a year that you've been a distributor, man, massive, massive, massive change. And I'm so glad you brought that last point of, anybody could have taken that situation, the religious person. I know for a fact, religious, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, the same thing. This is a sign. I keep trying to do this business, and God, the universe, is giving me a sign that this is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
But
Sounds like a
When-
conspiracy theory.
and then the other side of that, listen to this bullshit, right? It's like, if they're watching somebody else, they're giving advice. They're saying, "Oh no, you're just being tested." Me, it's a sign I'm not supposed to do something. You're being tested to see if you're going to push through.
That's such a great
Mhm.
point.
You could just use it to fit it into whatever you want.
Exactly.
It's all your
Whatever,
starting point.
exactly. Whatever equals to you not having to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
That's epic story. man.
Mitch, you brought up also this other point of like how you weren't able to handle all those things in that moment. And so it's like the box that you were in comes off, or like gets destroyed around you, and then you're able to rebuild essentially. It just brought into my mind how there's so many animals or insects that will go through these stages where they will shed their outer shell or their skin, or like, I've been seeing this meme lately of a butterfly. People think like, oh, I'm a caterpillar, and right now I'm just metamorphosizing into a caterpillar or a butterfly, right? And but it says in there, it's like, well, you don't actually realize that when the butterfly or when the caterpillar's in the cocoon, it's becoming liquefied. Like, are you able to handle getting liquefied? But think of like, just to grow in that sense, where you have to shed your outer shell. It's like you then feel vulnerable, because in that moment, whatever that being is completely vulnerable. It loses all of like what it's known as its protection, its housing, and all of that, right? And then, but you keep going, and part of the reason that it has to shed its shell is because it's growing, and its shell can no longer house it, and so that's the way that it happens. It's like you just provided for us like a really practical example of how that happens for us as humans, where we're shedding those things that we have grown as comfort for ourselves, but is also holding us back from actually becoming everything that we want to be. It's really
But let me make it abundantly clear. If you don't have TechnoTutor, it will not work. Take it from me, where I went through all different things. I worked in the startup world. I worked in with people who made their money in Wall Street. I worked with people who are in solar energy, people getting into politics, and then to California, people who are into shamanism and all sorts of shit, and people who live in Hollywood, and like I have exposed myself to as many things as possible, and none of it worked. Sure, I felt like I was getting liquefied a lot, and I was like undergoing transformation, and then I'd come out on the other end, and I'd still be like, why am I still fucking broke? Or why can I not make more than this amount of money per month? It was like this barometer that I couldn't get through. And then TechnoTutor came in. And even Jin, I listened to the Jin training so many times. I listened through level 4 when I would sleep. Such good material, but I couldn't process it. And TechnoTutor.
It's not the fault of Jin.
Yeah.
It's like anything. You could look at a science textbook and still not be able to process it, even though all the information's there.
Yeah.
You know, it's our education system is the problem, right?
Exactly. So then did it all with TechnoTutor. It's within me now. So I can actually just take in the input, process it, put out a good output. And
By the
now
way,
it's just awesome.
I saw somebody on a post on Facebook saying something about what would you do. It was something, I don't want to say the person's name. I saw you commented on it, but it was something like, what would you do if you could do whatever you really want to do or set your own purpose, or it was one of those kind of things. And they put on their own post, they would change the education system.
Oh yeah, I reached out to him.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. But what's interesting is when people, I just wanted to bring up that concept when people say that. When people say that, they're thinking they're going to go change the education system, like the way that they do things in the classroom or the technology they use or this or that or whatever.
That's how I
That's
used to.
not right, but that's not changing it. That's not what we mean by it. It's like when you think education system, you automatically think, oh, schools. I got to change the way the schools work. It's like, no, an education system is just a way of doing something in a replicatable way.
Oh man, was it you who posted in the distributor group, that guy who has a doctorate in education? You guys read that? And he's like, we are only in this like 100-year-old experiment. We have no idea how education actually happens. We're just testing things like right now. This is as if, this is as astronomy was 2,000 fucking years ago. Yeah. That's where we're at in education.
And the reality is when you look at TechnoTutor, we're doing it based on how education actually happens.
Exactly.
It's not a testing. It's an actually how it works. I mean, you ever seen a child learn a language just because they grew up in the home? It's utilizing the same mechanisms. Why isn't the school system doing that? Because the education system, it's like, you said everything's in reverse, right? So if they call it an education system, what is it really?
Miseducation.
A dumbing down system.
Right. It's not to make you smart, it's make you dumber. That's the purpose of it. So what they don't direct in the context of the education system, they don't direct the first 7 years of the child's life. They wait and then they direct the rest of it. That's the dumbest thing. Do you see what I'm saying? That's like trying to make the best meal after you already bought shitty ingredients. But if you just focused on getting really good ingredients, if you just got really good ingredients, you could not even do that great a job with the meal, but it's still going to be nutritious. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying you shouldn't then also do a good job with the meal, but
what it really is, it's like you bought shitty ingredients, you cooked it all, and then you're trying to it's already on the plate and you're trying to spice it and add salt and all.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, I'm going to arrange it like this, and it's still like shit.
You're like, you didn't cook the chicken, dude. It's not gonna it's gonna be gross.
So for those who want to change the education system, that's what we're doing. We are changing the system. What is the system? The system right now is you go to school, you do all this stuff. Whereas what the system should be is you'd have a child, someone is there all the time with them and building their vocabulary from the ground up. So everything you see with our kids is just because that's what we're doing. We're not putting the responsibility onto anyone else, and we have the tool to do it. It doesn't take that much. And then you see the results and it's like massive. And you guys are good to see because, we always talk about Max and you guys know Max very well, but you haven't even met Seneca yet, really.
Yeah, it's so true.
I saw that addition video. Oh,
I'm saying now she's 2. She just turned 2 and she's talking. Like when I walk down the stairs now, it's not just Max talking to me. It's Seneca now. She'll be like, "Hi, Cam. How are you doing?"
Nice.
Right. That's like how Seneca interacts now. Right. And she's so she's super athletic. Like she likes to climb up on stuff and go, "Cam, watch." I'm like, "Okay." And then she jumps off of it and she goes, "Do you see that?" right? It's amazing. All right. So you'll see that when y'all come down this year.
Cool.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
So education system, right? Meaning change the way education is done in the home from the beginning. That's the right approach. What were you going to say, Asta?
I forgot.
Good. Well, maybe we should leave it at that because I know we all have another call coming up kind of soon.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Any other final closing thoughts, Drake?
Yeah. Go visit selfperfected.com if you haven't already, if you're not part of our group. If you haven't seen what we're talking about as far as a community of people who is actually doing this, you really need to be on one of our global hangouts. If you enjoy this content here, the global hangout, you get to interact not just with us, but with everyone else in the group. And you get to really challenge yourself and really see what the community is really about, because it's way more than just this. This is just us, having fun on a podcast.
What are some of the things you guys do in terms of like challenges and stuff like that after, in those things?
Just this last week, Asif had a really great challenge, and it was just to see what you're doing in your own life, really, and what is just one thing that you need to change for your life that you could be doing, and share that with the group, right? And how you could practically do that. And then what's going on right now is that everyone's commenting on each other's shares, and they're getting things from it. They're saying, "Oh, thank you for sharing that. I can see this perspective." And then they're also helping out with like, "Hey, you said this. Could you clarify this?" And, "Oh, okay." Or some people are asking for help, and it's so great to see not just the interaction, but the actual growth that's taking place from it. Because I can guarantee you, when we have our next global hangout, which is probably later today, it's definitely later today.
Well, not when someone's listening to this,
right?
Recording it,
yeah. Right. But when we have our next global hangout, I know the results of it is going to be, hey, I did this. This is how it went out, and thank you guys for helping me out with this and whatever. It's so cool just seeing over the last 4 weeks how much we've grown and how intense and how awesome and how fun it's been. And the people that are coming into the group, they're saying such awesome things in our chats, calling us one-on-one directly. I've been getting a few calls, right? Like lately, I've been getting a lot of calls from people within the group of like, "Hey, can we have a one-on-one? Because this group is awesome. I really love it. I want more," And so if you're not a part of that already, if you're listening to this somehow and you are not a part of this group, definitely join the group. If you are part of the group and you're listening to this, engage more with others in the group, because and bring other people into the group. We've been getting a lot of people over the last few weeks, a lot of people coming in and being invited into the group, and we love it because they're good quality people and they're getting invited from good quality people, and that's how we grow, and that's how we spread this, and that's how we help others. If you've gotten some anything good out of this at all, it's kind of like Mitch and Asif were saying earlier, like, what kind of person are you if you don't share this? If this has been beneficial to you at any rate, are you going to be the asshole who's just like, "Oh, well, it's just for me"? Or are you that kind of person who's thinking like, "Well, I don't know what they're going to think of me if I share this with them"? Are you letting your ego really destroy you like that? Really take its revenge on you like that?
Revenge of the ego.
Yeah. So I'm going to challenge you to challenge yourself. If you're listening to this, share it with somebody. Share it with somebody who is like, "Hey, you need this," or share the group with them, one or the other, right? And we look forward to seeing you guys in there. That's pretty much it. Let's wrap this thing up.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Peace.